Welcome to the Inventory Nation podcast, a show designed to bring you the incredible voices and stories of veterinary professionals coast to coast, all while helping you to manage and control your inventory. I'm your host, Nicole, coach, advisor, and champion for veterinary teams and their inventory. Joining you live from the mountains of Montana, welcome to the show. Hello, welcome back to the Inventory Nation podcast. I'm so excited you're here. I just love spending this time talking about inventory with you. So today's episode, I want to talk about cost of goods sold, aka inventory cost, aka COGS. I've gotten a lot of questions recently about cost of goods sold, how to manage them, and practices who feel like their cost of goods are just way too high. So I wanted to break down my thoughts on high cost of goods, what that means for you, and of course, what you can do about them. So let's dive right in. So first and foremost, let's preface this by just talking about what cost of goods are. So I think especially in inventory, cost of goods or cost of goods sold is thrown around a lot, but it's just kind of like this broad umbrella term. And I want to make sure that we are both talking about the same thing. So cost of goods sold, aka COGS, is basically a group of expenses for your practice that includes anything related to taking care of a patient. So this can be pharmaceuticals, this could be prescription diets, this can be hospital supplies, retail items, in-house laboratory, reference laboratory items, even cremation. So that's kind of like a general idea of what's included in cost of goods. But if you're looking for kind of a really detailed explanation and kind of a breakdown of what's included, AHA has what's called a chart of accounts. It's a free resource, and it includes all the different categories of things included under the umbrella of cost of goods sold. So that's a really great resource. I will link it in the show notes at vetlogic.co/podcast for you to find there. So when we are talking about COGS, cost of goods sold, a great way to remember this is if it's related to a patient or taking care of a patient, it's probably in that category. So, but on the other hand, things that are not included are things like paper towels, toilet paper, janitorial supplies, bleach, pins, paper, that kind of thing. So that isn't directly related to the patient. So that's kind of included in another cost category. So when we're talking about cost of goods in this episode, and when we have other discussions, it's really going to be all about, what's related to taking care of our patients. So that's kind of what cost of goods are. Now, the other thing that we commonly hear is, what is a benchmark for this? And so this varies widely depending on the type of practice that you're at. So for example, if you are a small animal general practice, your ideal cost of goods typically is between 18 and 20%. So that means 18 to 20% of your spend essentially goes towards your cost of goods. So with that being said, though, if you are a specialty or emergency center, you're likely going to see a lot lower cost of goods sold. And that's for a number of reasons. But usually it's because the amount of services that you perform in relation to your cost of goods are much higher. So you perform a lot more services or treatments than, say, a general practice will do. Also, typically you don't sell flea and tick prevention, heartworm prevention, diets. And if you do sell diets, it's probably a small amount. So that's typically why we'll see a lot lower cost of goods for specialty and emergency practices. On the flip side, though, is mixed animal and large animal practices. Those are typically higher, and that's for a number of reasons, but first and foremost, your margin is a lot lower, especially if you are a practice that sees primarily livestock. And also, if we're looking at, cattle vaccines, a lot of antibiotics for cattle, you might get 15 to 30% markup on those items if you're lucky. So, there's a lot smaller margin when it comes to large animal practices. And in addition, typically, especially if you are working with a lot of farms and ranches, you're going to see, the proportion of your inventory sales may be higher, right? So if you are kind of the supplier for vaccines, dewormer, like just kind of all the things to, do the things with the cattle, essentially. That's kind of why we'll see that difference in cost of goods there. So you're going to likely be higher than 20%. So that's kind of the breakdown of where we want to be for that. But if you're a small animal general practice, you're going to want to stay between, 18 and 20%. Sometimes you can go a little higher, but again, it's kind of about your unique practice. So that's kind of first and foremost to keep in mind is a lot of times I talk about best practices, guidelines, everything like that. But the key is to really find and be curious, my favorite term, about what works best for your unique situation. Because one thing that I love about veterinary medicine is no two practices are the same. But on the flip side, we want to make sure you're being profitable at the same time. So now that we've kind of broken down what cost of goods are, what that kind of means for your practice, let's talk about how we actually bring these costs down. It's fairly common for me to find that a lot of practices really struggle with high cost of goods. So what can we do about that? So, first and foremost, I want to preface this with managing your cost of goods or reducing your cost of goods is so much more than just ordering less, right? Of course, that makes sense, right? Order less and our costs will be less. But at the same time, if we are ordering less, we don't want that to sacrifice our patient care. We don't want to kind of limit what we're ordering just for the sake of reducing our cost of goods. We want to look at it more strategically and holistically to make sure that we're managing all of the different variables of reducing our cost of goods. So I'm just going to throw out some questions for you to kind of reflect on and think about in your practice and just see if any of these resonate with you and you're like, ooh, that might be an area that I can review. So we're going to talk about that, but just keep in mind that managing and lowering our cost of goods, like I said, is so much more than just ordering less, because with inventory, our goals are twofold, right? We want to be able to provide our patients with our gold standard quality of care, right? We need to have what they need in stock to take care of our patients, reasonably, of course. And on the flip side, we want to make sure that we're maintaining, if not improving, the profitability of our practice. So we want to make sure that when we are considering inventory management, that we're looking at both sides of the coin. So first and foremost, what is your sales to product mix? So that's a good place to start, right? So if you recall me talking about having emergency or specialty practice is going to have a lot lower cost of goods because they perform a higher proportion of services in comparison to the revenue. The same goes for the flip side. If you prescribe or send home or, sell a lot of inventory in comparison to the services that you provide, you're naturally going to see a higher cost of goods. At the same time, if your treatment prices or your service prices are not where they should be, if they're too low, you're also likely going to see your cost of goods. So before we really start to think about reducing the amount of inventory that we carry on the shelf, we really want to look at our cost of goods and our sales slash service mix, or sorry, our sales slash inventory mix, to make sure that the proportion between the two isn't super skewed one way or the other. That'll just kind of give you an idea and a good baseline of kind of where we're starting. So the next point to kind of consider is, do you have a bunch of missed charges, right? So if we think about how many times your practice might miss a charge, this could be for a service, this could be for an inventory item, right? For an inventory item, it's even worse because technically we've paid for the item and then we're giving it away. So we're not getting reimbursed for that product. We do not have the profit for that product. But at the same time, if we are missing a lot of charges on the service, that will again shift our product and service mix so that our cost of goods will likely be elevated because we aren't bringing in that revenue from our services. So if we are missing a bunch of charges, it is really going to impact our cost of goods. So how high is your accounts receivable? Do you have a lot of missed charges? Do you have a process for auditing your medical records to check to see if you even are missing charges? Do you have clear charging guidelines, canned estimates, and other resources and training for your team to know exactly how they should be charging? Is there consistency in the way that things are charged? If a dog comes in tomorrow for an exploratory abdominal surgery, are they going to get charged the same as another dog that comes in 2 months down the line for that same exact surgery? How is that charging set up? So that kind of falls into like a bigger systems and procedures discussion, but that's a really good place to start because, so I'll just kind of share a story with you. So back when I was in practice, and it was not quite when I first started managing inventory, but one of the things that I noticed was I kept getting questions of how do I charge for this, right? We had a patient come in, and I think it's been a long time now, but I think it was like an oxygen therapy, and we didn't see that very often. So everyone is kind of scrambling around like, how do we charge for this? I think there was also a question of how our glucose curves charged for, and just some other procedures that aren't performed as often at that particular clinic. And so I would get questions all the time. How do I charge for this? And so I was like, there's got to be a better way, right? Because I'm kind of the bottleneck in this process. So how can I make sure that I'm not the resource that they come to, that I actually provide the resources for them to kind of empower them to know and understand kind of what those charging guidelines are? So that's kind of when I discovered, if you will, kind of the value of having those standards and kind of those guidelines for charging. So I think one of the first ones I created actually is hospitalized patient charging guidelines. And so there's 3 different levels, right? Level 1, level 2, level 3. And up until that point, it was fairly subjective as far as how that was charged for and which patient got to which level. So I worked to kind of standardize that. And so I can't remember the exact parameters now, but I think like level 1 was if they had an IV catheter and for a non-routine surgery. Level 2, I think, was probably a IV catheter and a urinary catheter, or maybe if the syringe pump was used. And then if they had like 5 or 7 plus treatments for that day or something like that. And the level 3 was if they needed an isolation ward, if they were on oxygen, if there was 15 plus treatment performed or something like that. That's not the exact details, but you kind of get an idea of now was no longer subjective, right? There was kind of like this list of requirements, if you will, for which one to charge for. And I really kind of went through and implemented those for a lot of different things. And it made a significant difference because not only was I no longer getting all the questions, but my team felt empowered to know how to charge for things. And then, of course, I performed chart audits to make sure that kind of like everyone understood the process. There wasn't anything that I could improve on or add. So kind of a short story long, it really helps to have some kind of standardized system for charging. That's highly what I recommend, or what I recommend highly. Also, in the same line of kind of charging consistently is having a set or kind of like a group of different dispensing fees. So sometimes, when I go in to do an audit and analysis of a practice's inventory, I'll see that randomly a bunch of items don't have a dispensing fee or, maybe they don't have an injection fee. And it's not because they're not supposed to, it just was missed. So we really want to make sure that consistency is the name of the game when it comes to charging. So this not only includes services, but also our inventory, right? How are we marking up our inventory items? Does this prescription need a fee? If it's a controlled substance, are we bumping that up with an extra controlled substance fee? So that kind of implementing that consistency will make a huge difference in, making sure that we are, heading in the right direction with your cost of goods. Because, if we're thinking about this right now and we want to reduce our cost of goods and all of a sudden we just say, okay, I'm just going to start spending less and ordering less, right? Without addressing all these other factors, we could be just trying to, I can't even remember the term. It's like fixing a leaky bucket that has a bunch of holes in it. I can't even remember the term, but you know what I mean, right? If we're missing all these other variables, it's kind of like, wait a second here. I'm not really seeing the results that I was hoping for or that I expected. So we need to have a little bit of a behavior change. We also need to implement the systems, but then we also really want to look at our ordering processes, how we're doing that, etc. So there's so many more variables than just, ordering less. So the next question, of course, is what are you ordering, right? Do you have a strategic plan for how you're placing those orders? Or are you just kind of ordering on gut feeling? Or maybe you're just ordering based upon what's on the want book. So I know I've talked before about how the want book can sometimes be problematic. It does have its place, don't get me wrong. I love my want book. But at the same time, we are expecting our team, to remember to write something when it's running low, but also for them to understand what low means. So it could be two different things or it could be really different things for every single team member on your team. So we want to make sure that we are quantifying that. So we don't want to super just rely on that want book and just take it as it is and say, okay, this is what people, said I needed to order. And if I don't order, or if they didn't write it down, it's not going to get ordered. We're going to run out. And it just kind of creates this cycle of ordering and managing inventory reactively rather than proactive. So I really like to set up, of course, if you can't tell, systems, procedures, all that kind of stuff. And I know it's kind of like the running joke of, oh yeah, standard operating procedures, want, 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 want. But I like to come at them from a place of helpfulness, right? And a resource and a guideline. So when you're buzzing around, running around like crazy, and you're like, how do I charge for this? Oh my gosh, do they get hospitalization level 1 or is it level 2? Do we charge for the syringe pump? Do we charge for ampicillin injectable? We can kind of cut down that craziness and that chaos by having those guidelines already prepared prior to the situation. So I don't think of like SOPs as kind of like a want thing, but more just like a helpful guide for you and your team so that, we have one less thing on our plate that's going to make us pull our hair out, basically. So let's kind of shift gears. We've kind of talked about these other variables that are less about ordering, but now I want to shift a little bit to talk about, two of the most common reasons that I see for high cost of goods when it comes to ordering. And so the first is having a bunch of different kinds of products, right? So we have like 5 different types of flea and tick prevention. We have all the different types of heartworm prevention. We have all the clients or all the products that our clients could ever want or need, right? And so with that typically comes a very, very high cost to the clinic. And so a lot of times going back to that audit and analysis that I'll run for practices, oftentimes if they have a bunch of different products on the shelf, it can be 2, 3, even 4+ years worth of stock for them. And so thinking about all the different types of duplicate products, that's a great way to say immediately as like, ooh, I don't necessarily need to be carrying all of those. I can just focus on maybe a primary, secondary product, or just a primary that sells very well. So, of course, we want our clients to feel like they have options, but at the same time, I think they're also looking for our recommendation and guidance on what, their veterinarian recommends. So, kind of that first reason for high cost of goods is really just all those duplicate products, right? 7 different types of ear cleaners, 4 different types of joint supplements, just kind of a pattern of excess, essentially. So the second reason for high cost of goods that I see is with kind of individual product overstock, right? So there's really no rhyme or reason to how much or what is getting ordered. And so you'll just have like a bunch of stuff on the shelf, right? Like 14 bottles of Proen or I wouldn't gabapentin is not a good example because usually that's super popular, but like amoxicillin, right? Amoxicillin I feel like isn't very widely used anymore, but sometimes they'll be like 3 huge 500 count bottles and it's like, wait a second, that's like a 10-year supply for amoxicillin. So it's kind of excess within individual products, but then also excess within a category and having a lot of different types of SKUs. So hopefully that kind of makes sense there. So those are kind of like my tips and thoughts on like high cost of goods and why you might be seeing them. But I just wanted to address something that I feel like I'm seeing a lot more often, and it's hospitals or corporate groups or somebody out there is just giving the inventory manager, the practice manager, the operations manager, just giving them a budget of like 18%, for example, let's just say, and expecting them to follow it. But on the flip side, not giving any guidance, training, or resources to how to actually make that happen. So I feel like it's super easy for somebody to just say like, oh, you have to spend 18% of what we made last week. It's like, wait a second, like that is not helpful at all, because what we're asking you to do is essentially just spend less without addressing all of these other cost of goods variables. You're getting asked to just buy less inventory, but not taking into account that we need that inventory to care for your patients. So I personally do not think it is effective at all to just give your inventory manager, your practice manager, a budget of 18% and just kind of let them go, right? We need to really support them in that role with training and guidance and guidelines and just helping them to develop those skills as an inventory manager that'll help them reduce the cost of goods, not just order less, right? Because I think it's kind of just kicking the can down the road, or we're really not developing systems that set us up for long-term success. I don't know how many times I've gotten an email or a message from somebody that's like, I'm so stressed out right now. Like, I'm given this budget. I'm not really told what to do. I don't know what to order. And I just feel for them because I know like the internal struggle that's going on there, right? You want to make sure that, you're doing a good job. You want to stay in as an inventory manager. You want to exceed and perform well in that role. But if you're not really given any guidance or training or resources to make that happen, it's a huge struggle. So if any members of the management team are out there listening to this, I really implore you to kind of take a look at your budget and make sure, don't get me wrong, I love a good budget, but that we're also backing up that budget with resources and guidelines and just a little bit of, I guess, education and support rather than just kind of setting them free with 18% and hoping they do well. So, because that is a big chunk and a big piece of profitability that plays for your practice. And so I just implore you, recommend to you that we not only look at this more holistically, but more than just giving them a budget and hoping for the best, because we're just kicking the can down the road. We really need to develop those systems, those policies, those procedures to make a lasting impact and a lasting change. So a little bit of tough love there, but I think it's for the best. And I think that, we just kind of need to work towards getting those systems in place for sure. So, and on that note, again, your inventory manager, as an inventory manager, whatever your role happens to be, it's really important that you get that dedicated time to manage an inventory. We want to think we're these great multitaskers, and some of us are better than others, but when it comes to kind of ordering managed inventory, we do need a little bit of time dedicated to making sure we do it right and not trying to like hold a dog, take a dog's temperature, see an appointment, call Mrs. Jones, all while trying to compile and place your order, right? We just need a little bit of time blocked off for that. Okay. So now that I've kind of talked about systems a lot and just really, I hope you kind of see, I guess this is really where my passion comes in, because I think when we implement systems and we kind of take care of getting rid of that internal chaos that's happening, right? We can really start to streamline and optimize and all those. I feel like I'm like a corporate buzzword bingo right now. Like optimize, streamline, what. But it is true. Like we can really, once we set a solid foundation, we can really start to move the needle in such a positive direction. We can focus on fine tuning and all these other stuff because, instead of, worrying about running out or, worry that we forgot to order something, we can kind of set those worries aside, right? Because we've addressed those and we can think about our pricing and how we're strategically working there, making sure that, we have great organization systems, we have great procedure systems. So, systems are just, I feel like, what makes the world go round. So inventory is really quite consistent and predictable once we kind of start to look at those trends and patterns. So I think that was one of the most interesting things that I kind of noticed when I first started managing inventory is we think that this demand is like all over the board. It's super crazy. But when you start to look at the numbers and the data, it actually becomes quite predictable. And so we can actually use that predictability to kind of leverage our systems and use it to help establish rules and kind of guidelines for what to order, when to order, how much to order, et cetera, without having to scramble because you got a text message that you're out of gauze or rabies vaccines or something like that. So that's kind of my thought on cost of goods, right? So I'd love for you to take away from this episode to just look outside of just ordering less. Of course, that's important, but it's not the only thing. There's all sorts of different variables when it comes to managing our cost of goods. So I don't know about you, y'all, but I have the most exciting announcement that I have seriously ever made in the history of my life. And I'm so excited for you to hear it. Okay, are you ready for this? Are you sitting down? Drum roll, please. I, along with several other amazing, incredibly talented folks that I've partnered with, we are developing an inventory management software system that is specifically designed for veterinary practices. Y'all, I cannot believe I'm saying this out loud right now because this has been a dream and a goal of mine since way even before I started veterinary care logistics. I saw the gap in inventory management software and I was like, oh my word, there has to be a better way. And so I'm just so excited about this announcement. So what it is it basically leverages your order and purchase history, your usage, to kind of automatically create a cycle count schedule based on your really kind of key important items. It also uses machine learning to really understand and learn buying patterns and trends to kind of create an exact list of everything you need to order each week. This includes hospital supplies. This includes pharmaceuticals. Anything you purchase, it'll give you a recommended order amount for that week based upon, what you have in stock. So I can't even explain to you how excited I am about this. And I would love for you to see it because one of the things that I've noticed year over year is how much time, energy, and dedication inventory managers spend trying to keep their practice management systems accurate. And it never really is. I mean, sometimes it is to some extent, but then otherwise, the wheels just come off the bus for some reason. And it's so disheartening to see all this time and their effort that they're putting into it without a lot of payoff. So one of the biggest things that I like about it is is a system, right? So we have this consistent standardized system. We kind of create this automated cycle count schedule and we can keep the inventory process simple, right? So this software is very simple, but it's also extremely powerful. So this means if you want to take a vacation, if you want to take a day off, other people can learn how to very quickly and easily place an order. So with that being said, I cannot believe I just announced that to you guys. I've had butterflies in my tummy for weeks, and I'm so excited that I finally get to tell you because it's hard for me to keep a secret. So I'm so excited to get that out here. So if you want to learn more about it, it has not been released yet, but it will be soon. We're talking mid-July, so we're coming up pretty quick. You can go to www.inventoryally.com. And this is really, developed to be essentially your ally in inventory management, your best friend, your buddy, just your sidekick. And so that's kind of how we're developing this. And one of the things that I am also most excited about this is the whole development roadmap is going to be super, super transparent. So you can add features you can submit a feature that you'd like to see. You can vote on it. we want your feedback. We want this to be your software. And so, because I know how sometimes like if it's an older software, not to name names, sometimes you call support and you're like, hey, I have this great idea for the feature. And it almost feels like they're laughing at you. I wanted the exact opposite. So you can kind of see all the features we're working on. You can upvote them. And then as soon as they go into development or they move along in the phase, you'll get a notification about it. So I just think this is going to be so much fun, so good, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. You can join the waitlist, inventoryally.com, and every month I'm going to have a kind of development roundtable where I'm going to share all the features that we're releasing, that have been released, and we'll kind of talk about some new and exciting things that are up and coming. So this is just a great opportunity to help make this your software. So I just would love for you to be a part of it. You can also DM me on Instagram at Veterinary Care Logistics if you want more information. Happy to share it with you. Happy to talk with you about the process. You can even schedule a demo if you'd like, or, as always, you can join the wait list. So those are kind of my thoughts on managing the variables of cost of goods, right? So we want to remember that cost of goods is more than just ordering less. We want to look at the big, whole, complete picture. So thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you enjoyed kind of the tough love about the budgeting because, sometimes a little tough love is helpful. And I'd love for you to check out Inventory Ally. Let me know on Instagram what you think about this episode, any topics that you'd like to hear. I really love to create things that are helpful. And so when I get those 5-star reviews on iTunes, or I guess it's dating myself again, Apple Podcasts, when I get the feedback, when I get the emails, when I get the comments that they enjoy that episode, it truly does just mean the world to me. And so thank you for sharing that with me. I also love when I get tagged in Instagram stories when somebody is listening to an episode while they're doing something. It's just really fun to see, and just it's such an honor to be a part of your day, even if it's a teeny tiny little part of your life. I just love it, and it's such an honor to me. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you have a wonderful week, a wonderful day, and we will talk soon. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Inventory Nation podcast and spending your time with me. I know your time is valuable and in short supply, so it truly is an honor. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe or leave a review. Be sure to visit vetlogic.co/podcast to access the show notes and discover additional links and resources. See you next time.